Hi, I'm Rasheed Ogunlaru, coach speaker, author of Soul Trader, Putting the Heart Back into Your Business, and of course, founder of Soul Leader, and just showing you the t-shirt if you're watching this on video. And welcome to this, the latest in the inspiring interview series of Soul Leader. And Soul Leader is all about heart-centered leadership. And I'm delighted to be here today with Dr. Andy Knox. Andy, I wonder, could you just, well, first of all, really, really warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad that there is a clock behind us, because I think that we could have so much that we might have to say. But could you just, for the purpose of anybody who doesn't know you, could you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in your background?
Yeah, sure. So I guess first and foremost, I think of myself as a husband and a dad. Been married to my beautiful wife for 22 years now, so exactly half my life. And we got three kids who are just beautiful human beings. Absolutely love them. I guess I'm a son, and I'm a brother, and I'm a friend. And then beyond all of those, I'm a GP. So I'm a doctor, a family doctor up in Lancashire and Cumbria. My practice splits over two areas. I'm the associate medical director for Lancashire and South Cumbria Integrated Care Board, where my focus is really on what I would call the social justice aspects of health, so population health and health inequity. And then I have kind of an honorary professor role at Lancaster University in the management school there. Yeah, particularly where my focus is on compassionate leadership.
And that was what you ended on. That wonderful introduction is really where we start this thing about compassionate leadership. Maybe we should dive in there. What's leadership to you, and what's compassionate leadership to you?
I wish I could lead my dogs. I've got two dogs around me who are being quite chaotic. I've got a Springer Spaniel and a Labradoodle, and rather than be nice and calm, they've decided to go completely bonkers. So I apologize if that spoils the noise at all.
No, that's all good. And if you need to go up chasing after them, then I would just fill in the gap. It's all good. It's all good here.
You two settle, sit. There we are. They're not going to. So leadership, that's such a great question, isn't it? I think leadership has so many different styles, and I'm not sure that there's necessarily one that is right, and maybe different leadership styles come to the fore at different times. But for me, I think in my journey of leadership, particularly over the last 15, 20 years, particularly the last 15, it's been to think about leadership as the gift of hospitality. So how do we hold and host great spaces that enable people to come together around really complex questions and conversations, and to be able to participate together to find solutions that work for everyone? So that is, and I think I think leadership, in my view, has moved away from the heroism of being able to ride in on the white horse and fix things and tell everyone what we're going to do, and actually holding a place in complexity to bring people together to say, so how shall we together find wisdom? How shall we together find a way through these issues that we're facing now, with all of the difficulties that are involved, and then giving space and the arc of that conversation, then being able to kind of, I guess, pull it together and then move us into action and into something that then begins to make a difference to that problem. So the danger with hospitality, I suppose, is you could just talk and talk and talk. But good hospitality, I think, gets you to a place where you're able to harvest the richness of that conversation and then turn it into action. So I've been really influenced by something called the Art of Hosting movement, which is a way of thinking about kind of how you bring people together in democratic participative processes. Yeah, and so for me, leadership is first and foremost about hospitality. That would be the word I would use. And that also means, by the way, having the humility to allow yourself to be hosted by others. So not always being the one that gathers, but actually being willing to be gathered into another's space and to let yourself be changed in that process.
Really powerful. And I'm sure there's lots of that we will kind of unpack more in different ways. Compassion, which is probably my favorite word. And I know it's something that really resonates with you. And one of the hats that we wear together is that we're both also associates for the Centre for Population Health, where a lot of that compassion, the passion and the work that you're also passionate around population health, where that means.
Yeah.
Compassion. What's that about for you?
Great question. So compassion, the root of the word, literally means to suffer with.
Mm.
It means to be with someone in their suffering, in their pain. And I think that compassionate leadership means to learn to be with people where they are, in what they're going through. And rather than trying to do things to them or for them, it is simply learning to be with them first. And it's from the being, it's from the being together with, in the context in which people find themselves, that we then begin to bring leadership gift and begin to think about, okay, so how together then do we begin to find a way through this? And I think that compassionate leadership doesn't mean, I don't think, I see your problem, therefore I'm going to come in and fix it for you. I think it means I'm going to be with you so much that I'm going to allow myself to feel and be changed by your lived experience. And then rather than take your power off you, I'm going to recognize your innate power, and I'm going to add my power to your power. And together we're going to use our power to bring change. I think, yeah, so for me, that's what compassion or compassionate leadership is about.
I like that a lot. And it's really interesting because as you say that, I like to sometimes feel what somebody said. So I was just hearing what you're saying, and then I was really feeling what you were saying, and I was just really sitting with what you're saying. Because there's an energy to that, isn't there? And immediately when we can sit with, when we can be alongside, then immediately there's an honoring.
Right.
There's immediately there's an honoring, isn't it? And often a deeper recognition of the other than we might have even thought at the beginning. I see. And immediately, isn't it? There's immediately we're in a space together that's a very alive space. It's not a theoretical thing. It's a felt thing, isn't it? It's like when people really have been met and honored.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a lovely moment for us to kind of go back to the beginning. I'd love to learn a little bit about your journey and your journey to leadership, and I guess what we're going to discuss and explore is those different ways in which you are a leader. There go the dogs again, isn't it? There.
My dog has just taken something off the Christmas tree.
Oh no. Yes, well, you know,
fine now. He's scared himself. So
at least it's a nice date stamp for this particular recording, isn't it? With so, but you know, it would be great to hear a little bit just about how it all began, and let's ignore that phone and so on. But Andy, could you tell us a little bit about your journey, how it began? When did you know you wanted to be in the medical field? When did you know that you wanted to be a doctor? Is that where it started for you? Can you just tell us a little bit about that journey? And then I'd love to explore when leadership, or this notion of leadership, first showed up for you in that journey.
It's a great question. So I think I pretty much, as long as I can remember, wanted to be a doctor. And then I flip-flopped around a lot during my teens, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do music. I was going to go to the Royal Northern College of Music, or whether I wanted to do acting, or whether I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I thought I wanted to do theology for a while. And then I kind of flip-flopped around. But as long as I can remember, and I think it's really because, so before I even was born, my dad's brother, Keith, who apparently I look extremely like now, he tragically died in a car accident in Uganda during the reign of Idi Amin. He was a medical doctor out there, was involved in a terrible car accident, and very sadly died when my eldest brother was just 1 year old. So I never met him, but he was so precious to my grandpa and to my dad and auntie and uncle, that I think we grew up hearing stories about him and what an amazing guy he was. And I think his life and the story of his life just really inspired me. And then I guess naturally, in terms of who I am, the way my brain works, the stuff I care about, my love of people, my mom was super keen that I should go and study medicine. When I was a bit torn and not really sure whether I was going to do music or medicine, and she really kind of sat me down and said, you know what? I see your passion for music, and if that is what you want to do, we will support you. but I think you might be making a mistake. I think this is who you are. This is what I see in you. And why don't you go do medicine first? And then if you hate it and everything, then go do music. And you've got that as a backstop to pick up another point. I mean, sneakily, I guess she knew that I was never, ever going to do a 5 or 6 year degree or then not use it. But I think I really appreciated elders around me who kind of saw stuff in me and encouraged me in it. So there was the inspiration of my uncle. There was the love, I guess, of my parents, seeing who I was and what I was good at and kind of helping me on my way without the arrogance of youth going, oh no, I know best. I'm going to just do what I want to do. There was I guess, a desire to not to want to please them, though I suppose that's often there for us in our relationship with our parents. But I guess I wanted wisdom. I wanted to know what is the best use of my life in the time that I have got on this earth. How can I best use the gifts that I have?
And how early did that bit? That's interesting, because I mean, all the things you said is really powerful and really, really profound. That your journey, there is this link to the family journey, the tragic loss of your uncle, and that who is clearly sounding a wonderful doctor. You're going on your own journey, your mother recognizing, okay, yep, there's the interest in music and so on, but why, and seeing something in you. And you talked about then that thing about the wisdom of the elders and so on. And then you said something which is really interesting. How could I best use the talents I had? How old were you when that thought, that thing in your consciousness was there? How old were you when there was that thought about how you would be to use your skills in your career? How old were you? Can you remember?
You know, honestly, I can remember the moment it happened. It happened in my bedroom one day, and I was just reading something, and I had this moment where I thought, I do not want my life to be a waste. I want to live life, and I want to give the best that I have in life for the service of others.
And how old were you? Can you remember?
14 years old. Yeah.
So I think this is really interesting, because different conversations I have with everyone in this series will be very, very, very different. And there's something quite profound in this, because I think also what's interesting that jumps out to me is that musical medicine was not a choice, isn't it? Music is medicine, and medicine can be music. You know, there's something really interesting here. And I can see, you know, it's interesting they talked about the music, the acting, the lawyer, theology, but yeah, I can see all of those things in their own way kind of dancing in you in terms of how it is that you approach things. If we use theology in a very broad kind of sense, it's very interesting. So for me, it's very interesting having this kind of conversation with you. That was there a moment, okay, so that's all of that is quite, some people might think, okay, that's really quite deep. And something quite purposeful about that quite early on. Did you always have a sense of that there was something quite purposeful about life? Because you know how for many people there are certain things that are there very early on at 14, that decision, you know, about living life to the full and the life and being in service. Was there always a kind of a sense of purpose, even from an earlier age?
Yeah, I think very much so. And I'm always a little bit conscious of talking about faith in the context of a very secular, what I would call post-Christian society. So I don't think that people have a right just to talk about their faith and A, make an assumption that other people know what it is. B, I don't necessarily always like some of the labels, because, for example, so I would call myself a Christian. But then I know that so many different people think Christians are very many different things. So if someone says to me, are you a Christian? I say, well, you tell me what you think a Christian is, and I'll tell you whether I'm one of those. Because do you know what I mean? Because if it means that you have a very certain view about the world, or that you're a right-wing evangelicalism that supports Trump, or all of those kind of things, I would very much distance myself from that kind of Christianity. But do I have a deep, profound sense of faith in God and feel a sense of that my life has purpose because of God's love and therefore a hope to bring love into communities and into society? Absolutely. So for me, growing up, I guess, in a very faith-filled household, it goes back generations and generations in my family line, back to some of the great reformers in the kind of Protestant church. I guess, you know, it's nothing that I feel ashamed about, but I also want to be really super careful about how I use the language and how that gets portrayed, because I think that there's a lot about the story of Christianity and the way that it's got entwined with the story of empire and colonialism over the years that is profoundly difficult and damaging. And so I'm on a journey trying to find out a way to talk about my faith authentically and honestly, not hiding it, but also in a way that is sensitive and kind and compassionate and not imperial. Do you know what I mean? So
magical what you said there. You know, I have a saying that most of these sayings kind of come to me. Language is our greatest contribution to understanding and misunderstanding. That language is both our greatest contribution to understanding and misunderstanding. And that language, even itself, isn't it? And as you said, well, what does one mean? What do you perceive that I mean by this or that? But it's interesting, isn't it, that faith, trust, that energy, whatever one calls, and that humanity, that element is really, really important, isn't it? And I get a sense from you that there's just something in there that's about our shared experience and kinship and just a humanity, and that thing about being in service, being alongside. That's what I'm hearing from you. And it's really interesting. So were you saying that the family roots? Am I getting the feeling that both the medical and the faith, you can go quite far back in the family, and it's there. There's a line, there's a thread.
Yeah, absolutely. I've become really interested in family history, actually. My mother-in-law, who's very sadly currently dying of a very aggressive dementia, she was huge into family history. And just understanding her love for family history has helped me and my wife kind of both look back into our family journeys and this sense of history and what's come through. And I think there's something in maybe British culture, maybe white British culture. And I don't even like the word white British culture, because even the word whiteness is so made up and so full of so much loaded language. But I'm trying to find a way to express it. I just don't think we're very good at knowing who we are or what our journey is or where we've come from. And so that is leading to many of the problems that we've got in society now. So I wrote a poem recently about when the race riots all happened after the very tragic event in Southport. And just talking about, we're all foreigners here. We're all refugees. All of us came to this island at different points in our history. And so just because some of us are more recent in our seeking asylum or in our seeking a different way of life, we have all found refuge in this island. And some of us are Brigantes, some of us are Danes, some of us are Celts, some of us are whatever we are, some of us Caribbean, some of us Bangladeshi, some of us, but actually the truth is we are an island of travelers, people who've settled here, but from many, many different nations and backgrounds. And so much of our story, if we don't know our story, we keep on making the same mistakes again and again. So my wife's history is that her family were persecuted Jews in Russia who under the Tsar had to flee to the UK. My family is Celtic and Danish in background. My wife's family is Canadian and Quaker and from the, has links into the Cadburys and a whole load of fascinating bits and pieces. But unless you look back and then you see how, gosh, if my wife's family literally had to flee their homes to come here to find refuge, how could I ever be someone who then didn't also provide refuge for others? Literally, my wife and my kids would not be here if it was not for their refugee status just a few generations ago. And so if we understand our own stories better, we can have so much more compassion for other people's stories. And it allows us to cross the divide of difference and stop the othering and stop pointing the finger and actually be deeply curious about, tell me, what's your story? Where did you come? What's your family story? What's been the journey here? Oh my goodness, isn't that a beautiful, rich tapestry? And how do we therefore learn to live well together in this space? And how do we honor each other's traditions and beliefs and the ways that we see the world? For me, that's a much more beautiful picture than what we've got right now.
It really is a much more beautiful thing. It makes me think of another saying that came to me. Our life stories at one and the same time, part fallacy, part fantasy, part reality.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we have all of these fallacy notions about this, that. There's the fantasy that we want to project, and then there's the reality of just the chain of events. And there's something about us being able to step back and seeing, again, we're coming back to this thing about that common humanity and this humility that's required to deeply understand the other's pain. And I really like the way that when you began, you talked about that in that meaning of compassion. I understand other people's pain. It's really interesting you say that, because it so strongly resonates with me. I can remember, I don't know if I've said it in any of these soul leader sessions so far, but for me, I think there was a real key part for me in my own journey, I guess, when I was a Samaritan volunteer, and I later was lucky enough to become co-director of the Central London branch of the Samaritans for a while. And I remember, and it's interesting, you talked about music. There was a while where I was, I think at that time I was trying to pursue my music career, get my career music off the ground whilst I worked in my part of my background. And I was trying to get all these things happen. I had time on my hands, so I was volunteering. And I remember a couple of things. It was the first time that I think I discovered empathy. I don't think the word compassion was in my vocabulary back then, really. It was in my vocabulary, but it was in my lived vocabulary. But I remember really clearly this sense of going in, doing my shifts, and I remember this clear sense of leaving myself by the door and being there present with somebody else. And there's something very, very profound about that. I think, Andy, there's so many things that you have put on the table for us to be mindful of here. I think there's something in leadership, isn't it? There's something about, in order for us to be alongside, there is something about this compassion that we are open to the experience, pain, hurt, pain, very small through to very big that somebody else might have, isn't it? It might be, oh my gosh, that they're struggling with all the weight of the work that they've got to do, or it could be far deeper than that. There's something about that. There's a real purposefulness and about this thing about transformation and this thing here about service. I want to dive in a little bit back into a bit more of your story. When you followed your mother's advice, clearly, and you became a doctor and so on. When did leadership first show up and for you? And I'm really curious to know a bit in your medical journey, what are all the rooms in which one has that leadership role? I mean, one thing that I'm curious about is that a GP, whether one's running a GP practice and has a leadership role there, or whether it is, you've got this responsibility for however many people might be on your books, and that people might look at you in some way as a lead. They may not use that term, but there's that responsibility. But tell us, when did leadership first show up for you, and what did you learn from your first encounter with it?
So I think I probably have always grown up with some kind of natural sense of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know.
Can I just ask, with a sibling? Now you're talking about that. Were there any siblings at all?
Yeah, 3 brothers. I'm number 3.
Hey, yeah.
But all pretty big personalities. I think if you didn't have, you could just be squashed in the midst of it. We're all quite verbose. I mean, you should be around our table at Christmas. It is like debate city. It's not, our wives are like, oh my gosh, they go and hide in another room because it just gets pretty raucous and full of interesting discussions, people lobbing some kind of controversial grenade, and then it all explodes. And so I think growing up in that environment, you learn to find your voice. Yeah, you learn what you think about things. And honestly, I think in some ways I've been reflecting on my relationship with my brothers recently for a bunch of different reasons. And one of the things that I'm really grateful for is they've taught me to learn. They've taught me to find my own voice and to know what I think about something. Because they were so good. I come from a family of lawyers. They're so good at putting the other argument forward that it makes you do your work and work out what you really think about something. I find it really odd when someone says, what do you think about this? And someone doesn't have an opinion. I'm like, how can you not have an opinion about that? So I guess part of that was formed in me round the kitchen table. But I very much always saw when there were issues of injustice in particularly on the wards when I was a junior doctor, and I would see ways that senior managers or leaders were behaving that was putting lives at risk, or rotas that were totally understaffed or unsafe. I would generally be the person to write and say, this is wrong, this has got to change, and get everyone else to sign it. And so we'd have a unified voice around stuff. And I guess I was then in a practice in my GP training where I had a fantastic training experience, very, very good people who kind of took me under their wing, really taught me the craft of being a GP and how to do it well. My trainer was an award-winning trainer. She was really fantastic. And I guess I had a lesson with her. There were two things that really transformed my thinking around leadership when I was a young doctor. The first was a guy who was mentoring me when I very first qualified and was in my very kind of first rotation. I had this really dapper suit and I was walking around. I had my stethoscope around my neck, a bit like, I don't know who I thought I was, like Doogie Howser MD or Noah Wiley from ER or something, and feeling great. And I was strutting down the corridor and feeling really fantastic. And look at me now, I'm so special. And he was a physio in the hospital, had been a mentor to me for a couple of years. And he just strode up alongside me and we were chatting away and blah, blah, blah. And he said, Andy, now that you've got that really dapper suit and that medical degree and that stethoscope around your neck, he said, just be careful how you walk. He said, strutting really doesn't become you. Which was like a punch in the stomach. But I'd rather that he'd said it to my face than slag me off behind his back. And I think those moments where someone who mentors you says something really hard to you can be a transformative moment if you've got the humility to receive it. And I think that for me, it helped me realize how we walk and the posture we carry says a huge amount about our leadership style and who we are and the kind of how secure we are or are not. So I love that challenge, and it really changed my thought of, gosh, if I'm going to be a leader I need to be careful how I walk, or even And then I went into when I was a few years later, I went into a training session with my mentor, and she was such a good tutor. And I let out this big sigh as I went into the session, and she said, "Oh, Andy, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong." I said, "Oh, Joe, I've just had one of those real heart sink patients. The kind that just comes back again and again and again and again, and nothing ever changes, and you feel like there's nothing that you do that makes a difference." And she said, "Whoa." She said, "Let me stop you right there." She said, "Andy, if your heart sinks when a patient comes into the room, the problem is not with the patient, with your heart." She said, "Get a bigger heart and never let me hear you talk about anyone as a heart sink patient ever again."
Wonderful.
And I think those two things, it's like, watch how you walk. Humility really matters. Don't get fed up with people, because your kindness and your compassion towards them, you don't have to walk in their shoes. You don't have to, they see you for 15 minutes. You don't have to walk out of the door with them and live their life. You just love them. Just be kind, be compassionate, be with them in their pain for the moment that you've got with them. And if you together with them can unlock anything, great. But what if they just want to come and unload for 15 minutes and be heard and be loved?
Right.
That's enough.
Right. Now we're talking absolutely magical. And there's so many lessons in there. And beyond that, how we walk, how big the heart is. What I love also about that is that thing about, okay, well, then what's our responsibility then when we are leading? And what's lovely is that there you've got two examples of where leaders are realizing that bit about how we can develop people is really important. One thing that struck me very profoundly in the work that I do as a leadership coach and so on, and as a trainer and facilitator, particularly in recent years, I've realized my job here, I've got to help hone, polish, and enhance. And for that, I need to bring things to people's attention in order that they can really, really shine, and that developmental feedback, and so that they can really lead and fully be all the things that they need to be. So I love those scenarios where they knew you, respected you, cared enough for you to say, hang on, and to have quite a different conversation, but in a way that they knew that how they could hold that space and to have that frank conversation with you, but from no doubt a space of love, care, kindness, compassion, and so on, and understanding you to help transform you and help hone you on your leadership journey. That's very important. It's very important. And one of the things that strikes me is, I mean, it ties in with the first story you told, isn't it? About the things that you would see often in this rota's not right. We're putting people at risk here. There's risk here, that blah, blah, blah. You know, this rota isn't serving us, not serving our patients or what have you, is that responsibility that we all have in asking questions and speaking up for transparency, for best practice, for so many things, isn't it? That thing about goes back to the thing you said about finding our voice and using our voice. Can I just, something's telling me to maybe jump to your book, The Six.
Oh, okay.
Could you wave that at us, please? Yeah.
I can. Here's the hardback, which we've sold out of now.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. That's wow.
And there's the paperback.
Wow. Can you show us the hardback book again, and the thickness of those books? Because you was talking about being verbose, and my word. That's
but the writing's big.
Oh, the writing's big. Okay, that's
and good. It's full of pictures. I got a brilliant, really great friend of mine called, well, I call her Truman. She's really called Louise Marie Welton, and she's drawn tons of pictures through it that kind of really help illustrate the chapters and give people space to stop and pause and think and reflect. So yeah, it's actually not a hard read. It's, people say it's quite a page turner. It really makes you, because I've written a lot of narrative in there, and then there's some pretty big meaty things to get your head around, and then there's lots of reflective space and questions and art, and yeah, it kind of flows together. So there's the hardback, there's the paperback. It's also on Kindle and it's on Audible, read by the brilliant actor Simon Bubba. So yeah.
Brilliant. And tell us, what's the book about?
In a nutshell, the book is about the fact that I think right now we are in what we would call an apocalyptic moment. Apocalypse doesn't mean the end of all things. It means things are being revealed for what they truly are. We, both globally and in this country, have staggering levels of injustice. I think our public services are at a precipice moment, whether we're talking about the NHS and lowest patient satisfaction rates, highest staff burnout rates, really low morales, record long waiting lists, widening inequity in our society, or if we're talking about schools and the fact that many of our school buildings are falling down, or the prisons being overcrowded, or the police being on their knees, or local government, many local government councils saying that they are facing bankruptcy in the very near future. We have created something that isn't any longer working, even though it's founded on beautiful principles and values and ideals. And there comes a moment where things are peeled back for what they are, and you see this massive kind of 1% global wealth and the whole economic system literally designed to flow upwards like a champagne glass. It's what the brilliant economist Catherine Trebeck talks about. And we see that things are exposed as being found wanting, weighed in the scales and found wanting. So one of my favorite economists, Mariana Mazzucato, she says that society is a manifestation of our values and who or what we value. And right now we can see, whether you look at healthcare, whether you look at education, across the board, there are some people in our society who we value far more than others. And therefore that asks us to have a different kind of conversation. And my question is, how do we begin to fix it? Because we can keep on trying to build more and more and change and shout louder and everyone's running faster and faster on the hamster wheel. But there comes a moment, I think, where you've got to go, for me as a doctor, can we diagnose this issue, please? Could we just take a step back and ask ourselves what's really happening here? Where are things going wrong? And how might we together fix it? So the book is really called Sick Society, Reimagining How We Live Well Together. We are really sick. We're sick in our attitudes. We're sick in through every part of society. We see sickness at work, whether it's through adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma and the horrendous long-term consequences of that, whether it's racism and division or all of the things that we see at play. And I guess my question was, so how might we begin to rebuild a society that really works for everyone in a way that has love as its foundation? So every single chapter is called love something. So it's called love school or love, I don't know, let me read one or two of them out. So there's love money, love. So what does it mean? Love dignity, love community, love freedom, love hospitality, love ecology. So if we really thought about putting love at the foundation of our society, and I'm going to qualify that in a minute, what would begin to be shaped? What would our prisons look like if love was at the core of them? What would our health and care system look like if love was at the core of it, rather than driven by money and financial targets? And I think if we put love both foundationally and front and center, the stuff that then needs to work begins to work. And I've been inspired both by Bell Hooks and her work on love is a verb. Love does something. Love isn't some sentimental feeling where we just all, oh, I just love this and it's so important. Love is gritty and it's hard work and it's determined and it costs us. And if we really want love as the foundation, then it looks completely different to how it looks now. And it asks us some really, really hard questions about justice. And I think the other one is Martin Luther King, that actually, love without power is sentimental and anemic. But power without love is abusive and destructive. Okay, but love and power together, they have the substance to change the world. That's Adam Kahan's work, drawing on Martin Luther King. And I think, goodness, if we thought about ourselves as leaders with two legs, one's called love and one's called power. And sometimes we walk with loving power and sometimes we walk with powerful love. And we have to know which leg we're putting forward at which time. So sometimes we have to make really hard decisions, and that's powerful love. And sometimes we have to do things that might be unpopular, and that's loving power. But all the time, those two things are working together for good. They're working together for the common good. They're working together against injustice. They're working together for a better world that is sustainable ecologically and for the good of humanity. That's Kate Raworth's work on donor economics. What if we began to think of money differently? What if we began to have a different relationship with politics and power? What if we began to create a society in which we valued everyone equally, not just equally, but equitably? What might that mean for us in the future of this globe? What kind of future are we going to leave for our children's children? It doesn't look like it looks now, does it? And that means reformation. It means reconciliation. It means revolution, but probably in an evolutionary way. And so my book begins to ask questions. It doesn't actually come up with loads of conclusions. It's deliberately inviting a different conversation for us to participate into and to reimagine what our society and our country could look like if we dared to put love at the heart of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Absolutely. I mean, that's the invitation, isn't it? And that's I remember we were both at this Centre for Population Health conference. When was it now? Maybe just over 2 weeks ago or so. And you speaking about this and those two legs. And sometimes it's loving power, sometimes it's powerful love. And I couldn't agree with you more. It struck me a few years ago. I suddenly realized, I thought, you know what? It would seem there are two things that have not evolved in our time as a species over millennia that I guess we have had our societies. Two things, our consciousness and our compassion. There were people highly conscious, very ill, and people very highly compassionate. Medicine, technology, look here, that, all of these things have evolved, but those two things haven't. For us to, continue as a speech, these are the two things that we have to do. And this is the invitation of your work and all the work of those people who you point to. And the beauty of that thing about love. You know what? Thank you so much for sharing that. I just feel as though I've already just drunk some of the book, and even from hearing that, it makes me think of something that I think is on the Soul Leader site. I remember I was trying to. I've got to. Thank you for writing the book. I haven't this time around. I haven't written the book yet, although I know what the book's like. I've got to spend writing the book. But the book follows my Soul Leader principles, which are clarity, customers, stroke colleagues and key players, courage, cooperation, compassion, creativity, and change. And when I was just finalizing putting an outline out at one point to my old publisher, I thought, how can I summarize this? And this quote came to me, from the head alone, transformational leadership is almost impossible. From the heart, it's inevitable. And for me, that's what you're talking about, that if one is showing up from love, if one shows up from love, it is impossible that that one-to-one that the doctor has with their patient isn't one which is really rich and collegiate and nourishing. It's impossible that two colleagues don't really respect it. It is impossible that in anything that anybody's doing there's not a richness. When you go to buy your newspaper, if people still buy newspaper, or when you're buying whatever that bit of fruit and you pass, hopefully a human being at some point, it's impossible. It's impossible, and it also strikes me that everything boils down to love and compassion or its absence. And that's what you're talking about here. So I guess our question in this remaining bit of time that we've got, I'm wondering, Andy, one of the things I'm fascinated about is this. Tell me, given many of the environments that we talk about where one then is a leader, many of the environments that people might find themselves leading in are the things that you talked about before. They're complex, they're challenging. It might be the NHS, it might be many of the places you pointed to. It might be in the NHS, it might be somebody who's a leader, heart-centered leader, because lots of the soul leaders, many of them will find themselves in people-related industries or ones that aren't, but they themselves are people. Might be somebody who's in the school system, might be somebody who's in education, but it could be somebody in any type of a business or an entrepreneur who's suddenly finding themselves a leader. I'd love to know, what are some of the things that you would invite them to consider in their journey? So somebody's been listening to this right now and has been struck by what you've said. And I love the thing you said about in the book where there's lots of pause for kind of reflection. Maybe that's it, right? First of all, there's going to be a reflection, an invitation to reflect, just to pause and to reflect for a moment. Who am I? Why am I here? Am I here to serve? Hopefully I'll come up to that realization if I'm in any leadership position, I'm here to serve. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts, because many people might be listening to you, watching you, thinking, I love what Andy said. I recognize it. I'm persuaded by it. Or he's reminded me of this. But it's complex. It's challenging. I've got all these things going on for me personally. I've got all these challenges in my organization, and I'm just one cog in a wheel. It might be somebody who's quite senior thinking, how can I play my part? I'd love to know your thoughts. What's 3 things that you might invite anybody who's listening to this to do?
Oh, so I think the wonderful thing about this is it actually isn't rocket science, but it is revolutionary in terms of how we think. Because leadership is not about top-down control or power. It is not imperial. It is what I'd call canarchic. It is the self-emptying.
So canarchic, for the people who might be...
Canarchic. So keno is a Greek word meaning hierarchy. Archy is the Greek word meaning hierarchy. And keno means to empty out. So I think if we're really going to be loving in leadership, we have to learn how to empty out the position of power for the sake of others. So it's about servant leadership. It's almost about laying our life down for the sake of, for the other, right? And I think that there are 4 parts to being able to do that well. And it's what I call the 4-fold practice. And I would normally talk about this in terms of care, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of love right now, because I think that's the framing of this conversation. So the first thing is, if we're really going to be able to love others, we've got to learn to love ourselves. Not because we want to be therefore puffed up and proud and oh, aren't I so amazing? I love myself, and it becomes all about me. So it's very, I'm not talking about a narcissistic self-love. I'm talking about a love where I just accept that I am deeply loved. And
Mm,
because I love myself, I take who I am seriously, that who I am in my community, in my family, that who I am and what I show up to do really matters. That
mm,
who I am as a dad really matters. It
mm,
really matters how I parent my kids. It
mm,
really matters. But I don't, if I can't love them unless I understand I love myself. So whether I need to go on a journey of my own healing from my own childhood in
mm,
order to be able to give them a good childhood,
mm,
whether I need to learn to self-care around whether it's my mind, my body, my spirit, that I'm taking care of myself, that I'm loving myself because who I am matters, because I
mm,
matter, because I am beautifully and unconditionally loved. Whether,
mm,
however you frame that, for me, as I've talked about from my faith, that very much comes from a sense of I am unconditionally loved by God. Therefore, who I show up to be has purpose. Now, you can find that love in lots of different ways,
mm,
but so there's something about I am loved. Therefore, the second thing is I allow myself to be loved.
mm,
If I'm constantly pushing others away, or I don't think I need to be loved, that's just my own egotistical nonsense, isn't it? Oh, I don't need anyone. I don't need you. I don't need. Of course, we need love. We're relational human beings. We exist. I don't like I think, therefore I am. I like I am loved, therefore I am. I'm in relationship, therefore I am. I'm in community, therefore I am. So,
mm,
so we've got to learn to be loved, to allow people in,
mm,
to let down the guard of our hearts and actually be vulnerable and authentic and let people see us all warts and all. You know, I've got two of my best mates were up the other day, and I feel like they know me so completely. There's nothing they don't know about me. All the gory, horrible bits that other people maybe don't see or know about me, all the things I struggle with, all the things I find painful or need healing. They see it and they know me and they love me and they know what's good for me. And I think we need friendship more than we've ever needed friendship, right?
mm,
And friendship love is so important. So we've got to learn to be loved. The third thing is then we have the capacity to love others. So
mm,
because I am loved, and
mhm,
because I love myself, I therefore have the inner strength, even in the midst of turmoil and trial and terrible stuff to deal with and all the complex stuff I'm dealing with in the NHS every day. I've got the wherewithal to still love you. And love is a choice. It's not a feeling. It's
mm,
not oh, today I don't feel like loving you, so I'll just be mean or horrible or unkind. No, love is a choice. I'm going to dig deep. And I've got the capacity and the capability to do that because I love myself and because I am loved. So I'm going to be able to love you, even in the midst of your pain or your difficulty, or even if you're super mean to me or unkind or you reject me. I'm going to draw a bigger circle of love around you. And I'm going to refuse to reject you, even if you reject me, because in the end, love wins through. And the fourth thing then is we learn to love with others. We love in community. We build solidarity. We build a sense of togetherness in this. I might want to see the whole of society transform, but I can't do it on my own. But if my teacher friends can transform their schools through love, and my banker friends can transform our economic system through love, and our politicians can transform the way we use power and governance through love, and you can transform music and leadership spaces in the way you use love, and we can do this in prisons, and we can do it in the police, and we can do it in business, and we can do it in the way we build motorways and the way that we think about caring for the ecology and the way we build houses. Oh my goodness, can you see an invitation to how we actually can all be part of this? It's an invitation. It's an invitation to recover and rediscover what it means to be human. And in that becoming more human, we become more loving and we discover our core purpose. And therefore we renew the earth together and we make it something that perpetuates through generations and makes the world more livable for the generations to come. We've got some big choices ahead of us. Are we gonna entrench down into more hatred of the other? Are we going to find ourselves expelling refugees and asylum seekers and saying, no, England's just for this group of people, and America's just for that group of people, and Hungary's just for that group of people, and Israel's just for that group of people, and Palestine's just for them, and Yemen's just for them, and South? Are we going to become more and more divided and more hateful? Are we going to become more destructive of the environment in which we live? Or are we going to put love front and center and foundational to how we recover our humanity and our ecology together and find a way that actually makes sense for everybody? And I know which story I want to be part of.
Oh, hello. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Andy. Thank you so much for that. And the passion and the aplomb with which you share it. And oh my word, there are just so many things that I want to kind of say before we move into our last kind of sections of this really rich conversation. I love those four things that you pointed out. And I think one of those that is really, really significant, of course, is where we often get stuck, is that piece that you talk about. Well, it's about allowing ourselves to be loved by others, but then that bit about loving others, because what often happens is, let me put it this way, often there's a saying that came to me recently, and it's one of those sayings. It's one of those sayings that people say, but often, that we don't often think about. It's a bit like when somebody says, "Did you do that on purpose?" On purpose is completely misconstrued. Is one on purpose or not? That's the conversation, of course, your parents had with you. Are you doing what you're doing on purpose? What's the thing that's going to allow you to be on purpose? So that's one thing about that. But the saying came to me, it's an everyday saying, maybe don't say it often enough every day, but can you find the room in your heart? And the answer, of course, for so many people is that they can't. But in order for all of the things that you've been talking about to happen, one has to find the room in their heart. That it's a one step, what you're saying, which I'm hearing very, very clearly, that this thing about leadership is actually a one step with these four dimensions to it. It's actually a one step thing, how I read it, and it's all the same thing, isn't it? It's like this journey of, if somebody's asked me, well, what's ultimately the work about that you do, Rasheed? Well, for me, it's three steps, and they're exactly the same as your four steps, because it's whether it's one or four. It's loving oneself, embracing oneself today, not as one is tomorrow, today, as one is now. Embracing life itself. All of the seasons of life will come, the ups, the downs, the thing is, we come, we go, all of that, all of it, all of the crazy beauty of life.
Yeah.
Then loving everybody else. That's an ongoing journey every single day. Every single day, because of people who will frustrate you, including some of the people you're related to.
Yes.
And all of that thing, there will be lessons. And in those lessons, or the things you find most tough, that's where the learning is. So what you're saying, I have to say, Andy, what you're doing is really magical work. And it's a really, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, it's wonderful, because I think for me, what you pointed to is exactly what Soul Leader is about. And actually the invitation for the Soul Leader is, I think that there are a number of things that are required. Right. One is, as you are, very, very clear of who am I, why am I here, what am I about, what is it that what's the magic that I uniquely bring to that? People that shy away from that, oh, I see that all the time, being very, very clear. Then the next thing, we need to be clear about the people we're there to serve, and everybody we're there to serve, but there'll be particular groups within that. Then one needs to have such courage, but it's courage fueled from the heart, because actually courage and compassion are two sides of the same coin. So to have that courage and the cooperation and the compassion and the creativity, and to be able to affect change. So when I hear you speak, I think there's a beautiful music in it. And I think that the thing that jumps out to me from our conversation is this, that it's really important to not be sidetracked by how complex we might think that it is. Because for me, life is actually something that's quite simple, that human beings tend to complicate, because most of the complex stuff happens below our level of our cognitive involvement in it, isn't it? All of the stuff that's going on, all the stuff that as a doctor, that there would be a handful of people of you who could say to me, here are all the things that are going on in your body, a thing that I actually cognitively, how I operate, I've no idea about. And so often we get complicated in what we try, in our own projection of all of those things that we think are complicated, that we don't do the real job at hand, which you're reminding of us, which is to show up and sing our song.
Right. Beautiful.
which is to show up and sing our song. So it made me laugh when you're talking about being, do I go down this route? And here's the other thing, isn't it, that you're very aware of. When one is really a soulful leader, heart-centered leader, it makes no difference ultimately whether one is a singer, whether one is a preacher, one is a gardener, whether one is a plumber. It's inconsequential because you're showing up with heart and you're singing your song and you're doing it in reverence for the song which is to be sung.
Yes, beautiful.
So first of all, I want to just thank you for sharing what you've shared with us. And I think that what you do magically well is to be able to highlight many of the systemic elements of this that one needs to be aware of, because one needs to be aware of in broad terms. This is me. This is the organization that I'm in. Okay, this is the economic system, or this is this. One needs to have that awareness to understand how they kind of vibrate. But what you're also pointing to us, that the really awakened souls know, that they understand that even though how some of these things run currently, there's something even more fundamental than that. Do you know what? Can I share with you a story that I've never shared with before? It goes back to my being very when I was young. I remember that I was reading, my favorite book when I was a kid was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh my gosh, the deeper magic.
And you've
Is
just
that what
pointed
you're going to
to
talk about?
That's the bit I was going to talk about. So when I was a
Come
kid
on.
reading this book, I
I
read it.
love that story.
And there's a bit, isn't there? There's a conversation between the witch and Aslan. There's a conversation because I think that the witch has captured, is it Edward, one of the kids?
Yeah.
And they're having this conversation because they're having a
Yeah.
talk about the rules of Narnia and so on. And the witch is very clear. Do you not know that all of the people, this is from my memory, anybody who comes to Narnia find themselves here because there's a deep magic that this is this. And then the lion reminds the witch there's a deeper magic. I remember as a kid thinking, there was something about that, or feeling, not even thinking, there's something in this deeper magic. There's something,
Yes.
I couldn't explain it, but I understood the essence of, there was something of this deeper magic that I just felt. It's about like when somebody hears a song or piece of music or sees something, it's felt. It's
Yeah.
not a cognitive thing. The mind is secondary. I think what I'm hearing from you, what you're pointing us to, is the mind as one lives in it. That stuff is secondary. I remember once, this is the last thing I said, I'm going to hand it back over to you because I'm really enjoying this dance. I remember once having to give this talk. I was invited to give this talk. It was to a group of doctors and so on. They were doctors and health professionals. I do a lot of work in the NHS. And I said to them something which was quite challenging. And who on earth was I to say this? I said, look, before you cut somebody open, before you give them any medicine, they have to believe in what you are doing for that healing. Is that true? There was a quiet nodding or whatever. There's something, isn't there? There's something in our common humanity. There's something in that, what you've pointed us to, when we meet, if we can genuinely meet, and the challenge is that very often two people have never met. The boss and the thingy, two siblings, that very often the thing is that we've never met. So you're inviting us in this emptying out. You're inviting us again to meet for the first time, sometimes for the first time. So first of all, I really want to thank you very profoundly. I just wonder, is there anything else that you're wanting to, for the record of this recording here, and thank you so much for being here, because for me, these are invitations, because it strikes me, these inspiring interviews are that all of these, any leader who's listening to this emerging, established, there'll be things that sometimes we need to, top ourselves up, be refreshed. Do you know what I mean? So any last things that you're wanting to share with somebody who's listening to this, Andy? Any last thoughts? Any last things you're wanting to put on the table?
I mean, I think what you have just shared is profound and beautiful. And you said it better than I could say. But I think that whole thing about the deeper magic, the more ancient story, the foundation stones are so important for us to decide which story we want to live in. Do we want to live in the story of competition and dog eats dog and abusive power and the best shall succeed? Or do we want to be part of the more ancient, beautiful story of life day laid down love, of hope,
Mm,
of kindness, of compassion, of true justice, of restorative justice, of
mm,
redemption and reconciliation and and joy,
mm,
like real deep joy. Because
mm,
if we do,
mm,
then in this moment, we must not be afraid to sing our song. One of my favorite musicians, composers is Jacob Collier. I love his work, his ability to weave harmony together, his ability to bring multitudes of voices, all singing their own different, unique melodies, but creating this cacophony of a symphony that opens the space and blasts open new hope of possibility. That is our moment. Our moment is to decide whether or not we will sing our song, whether or not we will dare to see that the light that is within us is so bright. And if we don't let it shine in this moment, the darkness will try to overcome it, though it will never do so. But we have a moment available to us as a generation to create a new song of possibility that turns things towards joyful hope and loving kindness. I
mm.
think, why would you want to align your life and your possessions and your resources with anything else?
I love that.
So
You
I
know,
guess that invitation from the Aslan, the lion, remains for us.
I love that.
Which,
It's so beautiful. I kind of want to just maybe end off with where you started. It was really beautiful that I asked you to introduce yourself, and you introduced yourself as a husband, as a father, and then you talked about, and I think you talked about that from this, from those things, from those family things. And my take on lots of this stuff is, even if one isn't on the page that you've described or that I've described, that we've invited people to, even if one at the moment is consumed with self-interest, usually with some underlying best intent, or just from the fear that I'm living a very, a life where I'm kind of more miserly and I'm afraid, but I feel that I need to overpower others or whatever. But even if in whatever your greed is, for whatever the thing is, care, because the chances are you might care about somebody, your partner, your child, your thing, or somebody, there will be one person, or there'll be one person. You've got to try and find just one person other than yourself. For that to happen, for the world, for them to be able to travel through this life how you might want them, is going to require this journey of love that we pointed to. So there is going to be, that is going to be very important. You're going to need to just open up that room in one's heart just that little bit wider in order for that to happen. Otherwise, they're not going to, even if you just care about them, when you leave your mansion, when you leave the villa, when they do, something will befall them that whereby that person, where they're not shown kindness. Do you want them to have perhaps an experience of kindness? So for me, that's also true, that even if one looks at it really, really selfishly, if it's just for that self, try it. Just try coming from that space of being a little bit more open-hearted.
right. And I think we all, whether we like it or not, we've all got our ego structures. I work a lot with something called the Enneagram. We all have our own ego structures that we want the world to think about us, or that the reasons why we behave in the ways that we do. And part of the journey of love is being allowed to take off the armor and take off the outward garments, take off the mask, become more authentically ourselves. And even if we're choosing it from a place of selfishness, or no one's motivations are ever pure. My motivations are never pure. Yours aren't either. But the more I choose into the way of love, the more I'm transformed. I'm transformed by our conversation today. I'm transformed by the way that you love me. I'm transformed by our friendship. I'm transformed by, and the more, even if I enter something from a poor motivation, if I allow myself to be loved, if I choose into love, even in strange moments, then I myself am changed. And then my selfishness begins to dissipate. And actually, I begin to myself become a more loving person.
That's just so wonderful. I think because of the musical side of you, and you talked about Jacob Collier, I think that what I'm going to do after this recording is that I'm going to send you just before the end and when we sign off, I think I'm going to send you 3 songs on WhatsApp. And one of them, tell me if you want to hear what any of them are. Oh, actually, I'm going to change that one. No, it needs to be that one. The fourth, there's a bonus one. Um, there are, do you want to hear what they are or not?
Yeah, I want to hear because other people want to hear now too.
These are all songs that I love. I think that one of the songs that I want to is the song "Believe" by Marcella Detroit. It's if there's a line, if there's freedom, then why would everyone want to fight? Because we're a long way from paradise. It's a song, give a little bit of love, you'll get it back. It's a beautiful song, just about, about just believing in that broadest sense So you took us from where, because sometimes people can even be caught up in one interpretation of faith, isn't it? To what you're pointing about, that faith that is for everyone, whatever lens we see life through. So there's that. The other I think I'm going to send you is Free by Stevie Wonder. It's a beautiful song. And the third one is a song called Dedication by an artist called Jamie Woon. I think this song you will just absolutely love. So I'm going to
Thank
do three songs. But can I just say, and the last one is one of my favorite songs. It's a song, well, the bonus one is a song called Consideration by a group called Reef. And it begins with the lines that every time I think of it, it moves me. I don't think that kindness is a weakness. And it's just a really beautiful song. It's just about it's exactly what you've talked about, that showing up with compassion and consideration. Can I, Andy, Dr. Andy, I just want to say really a heartfelt thank you. I know how busy you are as a GP. I know how busy you are through all the other work you do, associate medical director, and all the work that you're doing and in population health. First of all, can I say not just a thank you for the time that you spent here, can I thank you for all the work that you do for others as a GP? Can I thank you for the work that you do within the health sector? Can I thank you for the work that you do being an advocate for others and being fearless, and how you'll share that kind of joy and that passion for this message, for this song of love? Can I just thank you for all of that? Because it does take takes a lot. It takes a lot to do that, and it's wonderful that I can tell that you're from that. I want to share one last thing with you, which struck me. It's interesting. There are two things. There are two. Funny. There are two. Two kind of wells, if you like, that are quite unusual: the well of wisdom and the well of compassion. The well of wisdom and compassion, which are ultimately of one well, they're the two things that the more you draw from them, the deeper they get. The more you share from them, that's what you have, that's what you've experienced, that's what you emanate. The more that one draws from that well of compassion and wisdom, it goes deeper. It doesn't diminish, and that's what you're inviting. If anything, it deepens. The more you share of it, the more you give of it to others, the deeper that well gets, and the more enriching it is for everyone. So I just want to thank you for doing that and being an example of doing that. I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And I'm so looking forward to sharing this unedited. And we're having a joke at how I never edit these conversations. I never edit one thing. So just want to thank you so deeply for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. What a joy.
Thank you. Thank you.